Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here's what's coming up within the half hour. Iranian media reports of explosions near port cities as Tehran hits UAE tankers in Strait of Hormuz. Members of the Iranian parliament call for revenge over the killing of the supreme leader Ali Khamenei. Plus, the remains of 15 Indian tourists who died in a boat capsizing in Vietnam are repatriated. Let's begin the world today. Iranian state media say explosions have been heard near two Iranian port cities, Bandar Abbas and Bushehr. It comes after another night of strikes between the United States and Iran, with Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps saying it hit two UAE tankers in the Strait of Hormuz and targeted U.S. facilities in Jordan and Bahrain. Meanwhile, the U.S. military says it completed strikes on targets aimed at degrading Iran's ability to attack commercial shipping. Iranian state media reports that 3 people were killed in that attack. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has warned Iran against any attack, saying the days are over when someone strikes US and we don't strike them back twofold. On Monday, President Donald Trump said the US was reinstating a naval blockade of Iranian ports and would impose a 20% charge on all cargo shipped through the Strait of Hormuz. Meanwhile, members of the Iranian parliament today chanted for revenge over the killing of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei in U.S. joint strikes in Tehran in February. Parliament Deputy Speaker Hamdriza Haji Babieh said to colleagues all the parliament members pledge an allegiance with the leader by sending a message before the shouts echoed throughout the parliament. This comes days after Iranians gathered in their thousands for the funeral procession for Khamenei in Mashhad, following multi-day funeral ceremonies in several cities across Iran and Iraq. Ali Khamenei was killed during a joint US-Israeli military operation against Iran on February 28th. A memorandum of understanding for a ceasefire was signed between Tehran and Washington on June 17. A first round of talks took place later in Switzerland to reach a final agreement. Both sides have traded blame over memorandum violations in recent weeks. Meanwhile, Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson Li Jian says Beijing is deeply concerned by renewed fighting between the United States and Iran, urging both sides to preserve their ceasefire and restore safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz. The warning followed another night of U.S. strikes on Iran as Washington prepares to reinstate its blockade on vessels entering or leaving Iranian ports. Mr. Lin reaffirmed Beijing's position that the Strait of Hormuz is used for international navigation, while stressing the rights and interests of countries bordering the waterway. U.S. President Donald Trump said Washington would reinstate its blockade of Iranian ports from 4 p.m. today. Yemen's Houthis say they've launched missiles in Abha airport in southwestern Saudi Arabia in response to airstrikes on Sanaa's airport that they blamed on the kingdom. The Saudi-led coalition in Yemen, which backs the country's internationally recognized government, said its air defenses dealt with the missiles and no casualties were reported. The Houthis, who control northwestern Yemen and are backed by Iran, earlier accused Saudi Arabia of blatant aggression, saying it had struck the runway of Sanaa's airport. The strike was claimed by Yemen's government, which said it wanted to prevent an Iranian plane from landing. It was the most significant escalation in the largely dominant conflict between the Houthis and Saudi Arabia since an informal truce took effect 4 years ago. Yemen has been devastated by a civil war that began in 2014 when the Houthis ousted the government from Sana'a, the capital. The conflict escalated in 2015 after the Saudi-led coalition of Arab states intervened in an attempt to restore the government's rule. The United States has announced a sweeping campaign against the International Criminal Court that could include further sanctions and other measures, accusing it of posing an intolerable threat to U.S. sovereignty. The Trump administration said it would pressure other countries to withdraw from the court, marking a sharp escalation in U.S. efforts to isolate the Hague-based institution and starve it of political and financial support. The State Department said in a statement the campaign will systematically disable the ICC's ability to operate, target American servicemen or officials, or otherwise threaten American sovereignty. The U.S. has previously targeted individual court officials it deems a threat to U.S. interests, but the new whole of government campaign will pressure other nations to withdraw from the ICC and cut off any financial support to the court, according to the State Department.
Ourselves as a free and sovereign people. We choose our own leaders, we determine our own laws, and when we're accused of a crime, we stand for judgment before a jury of our own peers. This is the essential and indispensable feature of our form of government. It is the foundation of our shared way of life. But today, powerful people in faraway places want to take that away from us. They believe that they should be in charge of your laws, of your country, your life, and they don't care whether or not you agree. Halfway across the world, there's an institution that calls itself the International Criminal Court. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe you haven't. But chances are you don't know the names of its judges, of its prosecutors, or its president. And you shouldn't have to. But as we speak, the ICC and its friends are waging a war against our country, not with bullets or missiles, but with statutes, and compacts, and the force of so-called international law. When the ICC was born 24 years ago, they told us that it was merely a narrow backstop, a global court that would step in to prosecute only the gravest offenses, things like genocide and war crimes, and only when a nation's courts were unable to prosecute them on their own. But the truth is, it was something far more radical and extreme. It was a global tribunal staffed by unelected globalist bureaucrats who claim their power is almost unlimited. The danger of this global court has only continued to grow. Today, it threatens every aspect of our political and legal system. Border Patrol agents removing violent criminals from our country, American Marines risking their lives to defend our homeland, prosecutors working to dismantle terrorist plots to attack and kill Americans. If we stand idle, all of them would be at the mercy of foreign judges thousands of miles away, facing the constant risk of prosecution and even imprisonment for the so-called crime of defending their own country.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio on the American campaign against the ICC. I want to bring in now former ICC prosecutor Charles Adiogun Phillips. He's in London. Charles, as you listen to Marco Rubio speak about the ICC, you almost get the feeling that the ICC has done nothing good in its 24 years. It hasn't prosecuted some of the worst crimes and, crimes against humanity in recent times. And it almost seems like, the United States is upset that the ICC has finally possibly focused its searchlights on the U.S.
Well, it would seem so. Good evening, Amarachi, and it's good to be here with you. But the point has to be made from the onset that the fidelity of the prosecutor of the ICC is to something far more greater than the interests of the United States, and that thing is the rule of law. The ICC itself is a legacy of Nuremberg following the Second World War, and having been mandated to fight impunity against the most serious crimes known to mankind, the ICC cannot allow itself to be dissuaded by threats, because simply its obligation is not to any sovereign nation, but rather to the human race, the wider human race. That's what its obligation is, and rather. And from that point of view, the ICC should simply focus on the wider fidelity that it owes humanity, as opposed to the sovereign rights of the United States government.
do you think that there is more, to this campaign? Because it's just coming weeks after Chief Prosecutor Carrie Khan was recommended to be dismissed from the ICC as Chief Prosecutor following investigations have found evidence of sexual harassment and abuse of authority. It's pretty hard, imagining, some of these crimes that they're accusing him of, these allegations, because as someone who occupies that position as chief prosecutor, I'm sure that he knows and is very aware of the repercussions of any of these charges.
Again, the point has to be made that this is the first time that the ICC, as an institution, or the prosecutor of the ICC, has shifted the focus of that court from the continent of Africa to things happening in other areas in the world. He is the first, Mr. Khan is the first prosecutor that has, in effect, shifted the focus of what used to be termed a tribunal against Africa to a tribunal against the rest of the world. And we can very much see the outcome of that shift in focus. Very recently, the ICC has found itself having to change its own internal rules to fast track, or what I will term, the fast tracking of the removal of the prosecutor of that institution. Whether it is a coincidence that the United States happens to be making this statement barely weeks to the vote by the Assembly of State Parties remains to be seen. But what I feel is that this is the time for African countries and other countries that are in support of this global institution to take a stand and not allow the institution to be run down based on the whims and caprices of the United States or Israel.
But do you think African countries will really get behind, what you're saying? They might be supporting the United States because, as you rightly pointed out, a number of Africans have termed the ICC as, a witch hunt set up against African countries because, the prosecutions have taken place over the years. And funny enough, it is other African countries and other African leaders that have taken these African countries to the ICC and not other foreign governments.
Well, this is perhaps the ultimate test for this 23-year-old institution. And it's probably make or break this time around. The mere fact that it conveys the impression that it's all well and good when this court prosecutes leaders from the weaker parts of the world, and when indictments are launched against the leaders of Russia and Israel and the like, then all hell breaks loose, as it were. It is also an opportunity for Europe as a continent where the court is based to stand up to the bullying of the United States. The European Union, for example, has what is called the blocking statute. And it's a statute which essentially allows the EU to restrict Europeans and European entities from complying with sanctions that the EU considers abusive in its extraterritorial reach. Now, this is the time for the EU as a bloc to put that blocking statute into operation to prevent the US from literally running this court down. It's also an opportunity for the African Union as a bloc to take a stand on what it hitherto criticized as a court that focuses on African leaders. And now the court is not focusing on African leaders. And now the prosecutor that has changed that cause is now at risk of losing his job. That shouldn't be allowed to happen, in my view.
Charles, the U.S. says it's going to also recruit, other countries to, join in this campaign. What would it mean for the court, to which the U.S. is not signatory, to make good this promise? Do you think it will be able to rally up enough support to carry out this campaign against the ICC? And what would it mean for the ICC if, the US eventually did this? Because the ICC really isn't receiving any support from the United States. It's not a signatory to it. It really doesn't play any role in the courts. So what would this mean if it's able to carry out, its threat as posed by Marco Rubio?
Well, I mean, the practical effect on the operation of the court is very far-reaching. As it is, the functioning of the court is impeded, greatly impeded, by actions taken by the United States government. Members of the court cannot operate US dollar-based bank accounts. Even the email system within the court is in jeopardy. And if there are more signatories or willing countries to join the UN in this onslaught against the court, then it will have very far-reaching consequences to the effective operation of that institution. And that's why I say it should not be allowed to happen. The court is greater than the United States. It owes humanity. It owes its obligations to humanity as a whole and not to the sovereign interest of a particular state.
Charles, thank you again for speaking with us and helping us to understand this campaign to dismantle the ICC, as well as the repercussions on the rest of the world. Charles Ajogun Phillips, former ICC prosecutor. Thanks again.
Thank you, Amarichi. Thank you.
We're off on a short break on The World Today. Still ahead. Well, it's not your regular ride, I'd say that. Just take a look at this work of art. One man showing off his pimped ride, I guess. Stay with us after the break. Welcome back. The remains of 15 Indian tourists who died in a boat capsizing in Vietnam have been repatriated, arriving in Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj International Airport in Mumbai. Vietnam Airlines flight VN979 landed at 9:19 local time, carrying the victims' bodies back to India. Family members and officials were present as the remains were transferred for onward journeys to their hometowns for the last rites. The victims were part of a group of 32 Indian tourists on a company-sponsored trip organized by Lava International, the company behind Lava Mobiles. The boat accident occurred on July 11, about 400 meters from Honmei Rot Ngua Island, as the group was returning from the island-hopping excursion. 15 Indian tourists died. 21 people, including 4 Vietnamese crew members, were rescued by the local authorities. Among the dead were 10 from Tamil Nadu, 3 from Andhra Pradesh, and 2 from Kerala, including 2 women. Most survivors have since returned to India after receiving medical treatment. And the weather is doing the most in China. Floodwaters swallowed roads in Shenyang as the remnants of Typhoon Bavi vaulted northeast of the country, shutting the entire Metro Line 9 and several stations on Line 1. A car was seen driving through a submerged street in the Liaoning provincial capital Taiji district. Shenyang activated its highest flood control response, closing 73 waterlogged road sections, while dozens of bus routes and several rail services were suspended. Schools and training institutions were also ordered shut. According to state media, at least 240,000 people were evacuated across Liaoning as of Monday, with 5 rivers rising above warning levels and 26 reservoirs exceeding their flood control limits. Bavi had already forced more than 2.2 million people to evacuate Zhejiang, over 290,000 in Shanghai, and more than 180,000 in Fujian. We're staying with the weather, this time in Europe, the latest heat wave in France, bringing fresh misery to hundreds of migrants camped beneath elevated Metro Line 2 near Paris, Stalingrad Station. Many came to Europe seeking work, safety, and stability. Instead, they found tents, uncertain legal futures, and another struggle for water and shelter. While those migrants were seen setting up tents and resting beneath the viaduct, police spoke to people around the camp, while cleaning crews moved throughout the site and hosed down the pavement. According to some of them, it's not easy to sleep there. They'd come to France to work with just enough to get by. According to them, living in Africa has been tough. For those granted protection, legal status is not guaranteed a home or work. Others remain caught in asylum procedures or have no documents, leaving people with very different legal positions sharing the same stretch of pavement in Paris. Conditions became even worse, more punishing during France's record June wave. France sweltered again over the weekend, with Paris reaching 36.7 degrees Celsius on Saturday and 36.5 degrees Celsius on Sunday. Well, the weather had nothing on Paris, which lit up the Eiffel Tower with fireworks and 1,600 drones Monday night, just ahead of Bastille Day today, a spectacle one day before the national commemorations for victims of the 2016 Nice attack. We see bursts of fireworks surrounding the illuminated tower as coordinated drone lights form shapes and patterns near Champ de Mars. Titled Horror Ensemble, the show unfolded across 2012 themed sequences, including the French national motto Liberty, Equality and Fraternity, the 70th anniversary of the Paris home twinning, and the 400th anniversary of the French Navy. The fireworks were moved from July 14 to preserve the solemnity of commemorations marking 10 years since the Nice truck attack. The traditional military parade remained on Champs-Élysées this morning. His name is Yulalo. He's driving through the streets of Ciudad Nezahualcóyotl in his Volkswagen Beetle, manufactured and decorated almost entirely with metal turntable reels, becoming one of the most singular expressions of Mexican popular motoring. Well, this is him driving his car, showing off the design, which he has perfected for more than 20 years, and which today comprises around 3,500 pieces, with thousands of metal reels carefully integrated into its bodywork and more than 2 decades of continuous restorations. Eulalio's Beetle remains a unique, handcrafted piece that combines memory, creativity, and popular culture. I doubt that can keep the rain away, but it's really nice seeing that. Thanks for watching The World Today. I'm Amarachi Ubani.